She lost her left eye in Iraq. They lost their respect when she missed the 2,000-meter target completely. How can you teach us precision with half your vision? They mocked, watching her trembling hands reload. What happened next would haunt their dreams and redefine everything they thought they knew about impossible shots. Welcome to Quiet Tales Studio. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story intrigues you, please consider subscribing to Quiet Tales Studio for more untold stories of extraordinary women who deserve to be remembered. The morning mist clung to Fort Bragg's Special Operations Training Range like a shroud, muffling the sounds of early preparation. Charlie Company, the Army's most elite Delta Force selection candidates, moved with practiced efficiency across the firing line. 24 men who had survived months of brutal selection, each one convinced he represented the pinnacle of American military precision. Staff Sergeant Austin Reed adjusted his rifle scope with mechanical precision, his weathered hands moving through the familiar ritual of range preparation. Beside him, Sergeant First Class Caleb Stone cleaned his barrel with methodical care, occasionally glancing at the range control tower where their morning briefing would come from. "New instructor today," Stone muttered, not bothering to hide his skepticism. "Some civilian contractor they're bringing in for advanced marksmanship consultation," Reed snorted. "Another desk jockey with theories about shooting. Probably hasn't held a rifle since basic training." The morning sun climbed higher, burning off the mist and revealing the full scope of the range. Targets were positioned at various distances: 500 meters, 1,000 meters, 1,500 meters, and the standard training maximum of 2,000 meters. Beyond that, the range extended into wilderness, marked only by survey stakes and the occasional warning sign. At 0800 hours, a dust-covered pickup truck approached the range entrance. The vehicle was unremarkable: civilian plates, no military markings, the kind of truck a contractor might drive. When it stopped near the range control building, the woman who emerged seemed entirely out of place among the gathered Delta candidates. Major Victoria Kane moved with an economy of motion that spoke of military training, but something was immediately apparent to every man watching. A black eye patch covered her left eye, and when she reached for her equipment case, her hands showed the faintest tremor. "Jesus," whispered Private First Class Dylan Fox, the youngest member of Charlie Company. "They sent us Patchy the Pirate." Subdued laughter rippled through the formation. These were men accustomed to perfection, to instructors who embodied the absolute pinnacle of military prowess. The woman approaching them seemed to represent everything they'd been trained to overcome: visible injury, apparent weakness, uncertainty. Colonel Gregory Wells emerged from the range control building, his expression carefully neutral as he approached Kane. Their conversation was brief, professional, and conducted in tones too low for the candidates to overhear. But body language spoke volumes. Wells's rigid posture suggested reluctance, while Kane's calm demeanor indicated she was accustomed to skepticism. "Charlie Company, attention!" Wells's voice cut across the range like a blade. The 24 candidates snapped to formation, their movements synchronized and precise. "This is Major Victoria Kane," Wells announced, gesturing toward the woman who now stood beside him. "She'll be conducting today's advanced marksmanship evaluation. 15 years Army Special Operations, multiple deployments, specialized training in extreme range precision shooting." The introduction was factual, clinical, and notably brief. Wells provided no details about Kane's service record, no explanation for her current civilian status, and no acknowledgement of the obvious questions her appearance raised. Kane stepped forward, her single eye scanning the formation with professional assessment. When she spoke, her voice carried the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to command, despite her current contractor status. "Gentlemen, today we're going to explore the boundaries of what you consider possible," she began, her tone matter-of-fact. "Precision shooting isn't about the weapon. It isn't about the conditions. It's about understanding limitations, your own, your equipment's, and your environment's." She paused, noting the barely concealed skepticism in their faces. Several candidates exchanged glances, their doubt obvious. Your standard training maximum is 2,000 meters, Kane continued. Today, we'll see who can consistently engage targets at that distance under various conditions. Wind speed is currently 8 to 12 mph from the northwest. Temperature is 67 degrees and rising. Humidity is at 45%. Sergeant Stone raised his hand. "Ma'am, will you be demonstrating the techniques you're teaching?" The question carried an undercurrent that wasn't lost on anyone present. These men had been trained by the best marksmen in the world. Instructors who could hit targets they could barely see, who embodied the skills they were teaching. Kane nodded calmly. "I'll take the first shot to establish baseline conditions." She moved to the primary firing position, a concrete platform that provided a stable shooting base with a clear line of sight downrange. Her equipment case opened to reveal a custom rifle that immediately caught the attention of every man present, a precision-built weapon that probably cost more than most soldiers made in a year. But as Kane assembled her rifle, something became immediately apparent. Her hands weren't entirely steady, the tremor wasn't severe, but it was visible to men trained to notice such details. When she attached the scope, her fingers fumbled slightly with the mounting rings. "Need assistance, ma'am," Reed offered, his tone carefully neutral but tinged with concern. "I'm fine, thank you," Kane replied, continuing her setup. Despite the tremor, her movements held the unmistakable efficiency of someone who had performed these actions thousands of times. Fox leaned toward Stone. "Think she's nervous?" Stone shook his head slowly. "Something else. Look at the way she handles the weapon. She knows what she's doing, even if her hands are shaking." Kane loaded a single round into the chamber, then settled into shooting position. Through their spotting scopes, the candidates could see the 2,000-meter target, a standard military silhouette barely visible even through magnification. The wind had picked up slightly, adding another variable to an already challenging shot. At 2,000 meters, even a slight miscalculation could result in a complete miss. For someone with visibly unsteady hands and compromised vision, the shot bordered on impossible. Kane's breathing slowed, her body settling into the classic sniper's firing position. Despite her physical limitations, something about her absolute focus gave the watching candidates pause. This wasn't the desperate concentration of someone in over their head. It was the calm preparation of a professional. She fired. The suppressor reduced what would have been a thunderous report to a sharp crack that echoed across the range. Through their scopes, the candidates watched the distant target, waiting for the telltale impact that would indicate a hit. Nothing. The target remained unmarked, untouched, a complete miss. The silence that followed was heavy with disappointment and barely concealed judgment. These were men who had been trained to hit targets at 2,000 meters under perfect conditions. Watching their instructor miss the same shot was profoundly unsettling. "Wind must have caught it," Reed said quietly, trying to offer a face-saving explanation. But Stone's expression was troubled. At that distance, with those conditions, that should have been manageable for someone with her supposed background. Kane ejected the spent case and reloaded, her movement still betraying that slight tremor. She settled back into position, made minute adjustments to her scope, and fired again. Another miss. This time, the candidates couldn't hide their reaction. Whispered conversations broke out along the firing line, their earlier skepticism crystallizing into something approaching pity. "Ma'am," Fox spoke up, his voice carrying the forced respect of military protocol, "would you like us to check the scope calibration? Sometimes equipment can be knocked out of alignment during transport." Kane lowered her rifle and looked at the young soldier with her single eye. There was no anger in her expression, no defensive reaction to the implied criticism. Instead, there was something that might have been amusement. "The equipment is functioning perfectly, Private," she said calmly. "As am I." She stood, moved away from the firing position, and gestured for Reed to take her place. "Sergeant Reed, let's see your baseline performance at 2,000 meters." Reed moved forward with confidence, settling into position with his own precision rifle. The shot, when it came, was textbook perfect, a center mass hit that drew approving nods from his fellow candidates. "Excellent," Kane observed. "Sergeant Stone, your turn." One by one, the Delta candidates engaged the 2,000-meter target. Their performance was impressive. Out of 24 shots, 19 found their mark. These were among the finest marksmen in the American military, and their skills were undeniably elite. But as the morning progressed, something began to nag at several of the more observant candidates. Kane's misses hadn't been random. Both shots had gone high and to the right, in a pattern that suggested deliberate aim rather than poor marksmanship. Fox found himself studying the terrain beyond the 2,000-meter target line. The range extended much further into the wilderness, marked by survey stakes that indicated measured distances. His eyes caught something that made him reach for his binoculars. "Sergeant Stone," he said quietly, "take a look at the 3,200-meter marker." Stone raised his own binoculars, scanning the distant terrain until he found the survey stake Fox had indicated. What he saw there made him lower the binoculars slowly, his expression shifting from confusion to something approaching awe. Mounted on the survey stake, barely visible even through high-powered optics, was a small reflective target. And in the center of that target were two bullet holes, grouped so tightly they almost appeared as one. "Holy shit," Stone breathed. The realization spread through Charlie Company like wildfire. Kane hadn't missed the 2,000-meter target. She had been aiming at something else entirely, something they couldn't even see without optical assistance, at a distance that pushed the very boundaries of what was considered possible in precision shooting. Reed was the first to approach Kane directly. "Ma'am, the 3,200-meter target." Kane nodded calmly. 2 shots, centered mass, wind compensation calculated for extended range, trajectory adjusted for the additional drop, scope elevation corrected for the increased distance. The candidates stared at her in stunned silence. What she had just described was a shooting feat that belonged in the realm of legend rather than reality. At 3,200 meters, they were talking about a shot that would challenge the world's best snipers under perfect conditions, and she had done it twice, consecutively, with visible physical impairments. "How?" Fox asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Kane's single eye studied the young soldier for a moment before she answered. "Vision isn't about how much you can see, it's about understanding what you're looking at." She moved back to the firing position, began disassembling her rifle with the same trembling hands that had just accomplished the impossible. "Your evaluation begins now, gentlemen. Not at 2,000 meters, at 3,200. Let's see who among you can adapt to conditions beyond your training parameters." The challenge that followed was unlike anything Charlie Company had experienced. One by one, the Delta candidates attempted shots at the distant target, using the most advanced equipment available to American Special Operations Forces. Reed went first, his confidence evaporating as his shot fell short by at least 200 meters. Stone followed, managing to get closer, but still missing by a significant margin. Each subsequent attempt yielded similar results, highly skilled marksmen humbled by a distance that pushed beyond the limits of their training and experience. After the 20th consecutive miss, Fox threw down his rifle in frustration. "It's impossible," he declared. "No one can make that shot consistently. The variables are too extreme." Kane, who had been observing silently, stepped forward. "You're correct, Private. Under normal circumstances, with standard training parameters, that shot is essentially impossible." She gestured toward the distant target. "But we're not dealing with normal circumstances. In combat, you don't get to choose your engagement distances. You don't get perfect conditions. You adapt to what the situation demands." Stone, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the cool morning air, looked directly at Kane. "Ma'am, with all due respect, how did you learn to make shots like that? That level of precision, it's beyond anything we've been taught." For the first time that morning, Kane's composed demeanor shifted slightly. Her single eye seemed to focus on something beyond the present moment, beyond the range, beyond the watching candidates. "Fallujah, 2021, she said quietly. Fourth deployment, embedded with a joint special operations task force. Our mission was to provide overwatch for a high-value target extraction in a densely populated urban environment. The candidates drew closer, sensing that they were about to hear something significant. Intelligence had identified a terrorist bomb maker who was responsible for multiple IED attacks against American and Iraqi forces. The problem was his location, a compound in the middle of a residential neighborhood surrounded by civilians. Kane's hands, which had been trembling slightly throughout the morning, seemed to steady as she spoke about her past. Standard rules of engagement prohibited close air support due to collateral damage concerns. Ground assault was ruled out for the same reason. That left precision elimination from extended range as the only viable option. Reed leaned forward. How extended? 3,912 meters, Kane replied without hesitation, from a partially collapsed building on the opposite side of the city. Wind conditions were variable. Temperature was 124 degrees Fahrenheit, and I had approximately a 3-second window when the target would be visible through a gap in the compound's walls. The numbers were staggering. Even the world record for confirmed sniper kills fell short of the distance Kane was describing. The shot was successful, she continued. The bomb maker was eliminated, and the extraction team completed their mission without encountering the prepared explosives that would have been waiting for them. Fox stared at her with new understanding. That's how you lost your eye, the mission in Fallujah. Kane nodded slowly. The compound contained more than just bomb-making materials. When our target was eliminated, secondary explosions began occurring throughout the building. My spotter and I were caught in a structural collapse caused by the detonations. She touched the edge of her eye patch with fingers that no longer trembled. Shrapnel from reinforced concrete. It took the eye but missed the brain by approximately 1 centimeter. My spotter wasn't as fortunate. The silence that followed was absolute. These men, who had been trained to compartmentalize emotion and focus on mission parameters, found themselves confronting the human cost of the skills they were learning. Stone was the first to speak. "Ma'am, after an injury like that, how did you continue operating?" "I didn't," Kane replied simply. "Medical retirement was mandatory. Loss of depth perception, reduced peripheral vision, classified as unfit for combat operations." She gestured toward her rifle case. "But retirement doesn't mean the end of service. It means finding new ways to contribute." Reed studied her with new respect. "The contractor position. You're training the next generation." "Among other things," Kane confirmed, "the techniques you witnessed today, extreme range precision shooting, have applications beyond traditional combat scenarios. Hostage rescue, counterterrorism, protection of high-value assets in denied areas." She moved back to the firing position one final time. "But the most important lesson isn't about shooting at impossible distances. It's about understanding that limitations are often just untested assumptions." Kane assembled her rifle with fluid efficiency, her earlier tremor completely absent now. The candidates watched in silence as she settled into position, aligned her scope, and began the breathing pattern that preceded a precision shot. "The 3,200-meter target," she announced calmly. "Third shot, accounting for wind shift and temperature variation." The shot, when it came, seemed to hang in the air longer than physics should have allowed. Through their binoculars, the candidates watched the distant target, waiting for confirmation of what they already knew would be another impossible hit. The bullet struck dead center, joining the 2 previous impacts in a group that could be covered by a silver dollar. As Kane safeguarded her weapon and began packing her equipment, Stone approached her with something that looked like reverence. "Ma'am, I owe you an apology. We all do. When we made assumptions." Kane looked up from her rifle case, her single eye meeting his gaze directly. "Sergeant, assumptions are natural. They're survival mechanisms that help us process information quickly. The problem comes when we mistake assumptions for facts." She stood, shouldering her equipment case with the same economy of motion she'd displayed all morning. "You assumed that visible limitations meant diminished capability. You assumed that standard training parameters represented absolute boundaries. You assumed that precision shooting was about perfect conditions rather than perfect adaptation." Fox stepped forward. "What you've shown us today, It changes everything we thought we knew about what's possible. No, Kane replied, walking toward her truck. What you've learned today is that what you thought was impossible was simply unfamiliar. The shot I made, and the shots you'll eventually make, aren't magic. They're the result of understanding that excellence isn't about perfect circumstances. It's about perfect preparation for imperfect circumstances. As she reached her vehicle, Reed called out one final question. "Ma'am, will we see you again? For advanced training?" Kane paused with her hand on the door handle, considering the question. "That depends, Sergeant. Are you ready to learn what you can accomplish when you stop limiting yourself to what you think you can see?" Without waiting for an answer, she climbed into her truck and drove away, leaving behind 24 Delta Force candidates who would never again assume that visible limitations meant diminished capability. 3 months later, Charlie Company would graduate from selection with the highest marksmanship scores in program history. Their instructors' methods, pushing beyond assumed limitations, adapting to extreme conditions, finding precision in imperfection, would become standard curriculum. But none of them would ever forget the morning when a one-eyed woman with trembling hands taught them that vision isn't about how much you can see. It's about understanding what you're looking at. And sometimes, what you're looking at is impossible until someone shows you it's not. Underscore blank. Have you ever met someone who taught you that your limitations were just untested assumptions? Someone whose quiet expertise redefined what you thought was possible? Tell us about them in the comments below, and let us know what city you're watching from today. If this story touched you, subscribe to Quiet Tales Studio for more untold stories of extraordinary women who changed the world without asking for recognition. We'll see you in the next one.